organizational effectiveness. With that said, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen, Ashutosh. I have the access, right?
Yes, you can go ahead and share the screen. Just let me know in case there is any issue.
Okay, I think I am able to. All right. Can somebody confirm if you guys can see my screen? Ashutosh, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can see. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So we're going to start, with the webinar today. And the focus for today's webinar is what is organization culture? What is, I'm going to also introduce to CVF, which is also competing values framework. And we're going to talk a little bit about the connection between culture and improved performance. We are going to do that for the first 30-35 minutes. And then the rest of the time we can leave it for Q&A, based on the questions you guys are going to ask. We're going to have a discussion basically. Okay. So let's get started. So how do you describe these companies in one word? You can post your answers in the chat window, because I think you're all on mute. You won't be able to speak.
Yeah, in case anyone wants to speak, you can unmute yourself and speak. So yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and speak. I mean, if you want to describe these companies in one word.
I think you muted. Okay. We have a small group. So Ashutosh will leave the, thing open. So let's talk and have conversations. So how do you guys describe these companies in one word if I had to ask you? What comes to your mind when you think of Kodak or Nokia or Boeing?
There are few sync up with the market and changed as per the market.
Yeah, right. And Aparna also says they fail to respond to change. So eventually what happened to these companies? Because they fail to respond to change.
They will be there in existence if they are as per the responding to change. Yeah. If not, they will be out of the market.
Correct. That's right. So how do you describe this list of companies in one word, if you have to say? Do you see a difference in the previous group versus this group?
They are aligning with the customer mindset. Accordingly, they are moving on.
Right. So basically, the ones that we saw in the previous, are some examples of how these companies failed. And these are the examples. These organizations like Apple, Google, IKEA, Lego are the companies that aligned with the organization goals and the culture and actually came out to be more successful. Right. So with that said, why do you think some companies succeed and some companies fail? What could be the reasons? There could be any reasons, right? Many reasons. You don't need to tell me the top reasons. You can just throw the answers out and we can talk.
Competing with the market.
Yeah. So one, they could not compete with the market. Maybe that's why they failed. Or if they were able to, compete with the market and create a space for themselves, then they would have succeeded. What else? What else comes to your mind? And also
not because of updating themselves.
Yeah. Okay. That's also a good answer. What else? What do you mean by updating? Is it because, I see somebody has written less empowering people.
Adapting. Collaboration is missing.
Yeah. And all of this is constituting to something. What is that? Whatever you guys are talking about, there is no
collaboration, Rashmi.
Yeah, collaboration is one of them, and that's a value.
Okay.
There is no scope for learning while
business value.
Yeah, maybe they did not focus on business value. There are underlying reasons why they could not do all of that. So I'm trying to get to that. Okay, so I'll give it away to you in the interest of time. What I'm trying to get to is, talking about company culture or organization culture. In the last 10 years, leadership and culture have been recognized as the top two impediments for, organization failure or success, right? If an organization did not have the right or the positive culture, most of those organizations have failed. And even in the transformation journeys that we are trying to have, organization, culture and leadership are the top two impediments for, transformation failures or organization failures, Okay, so there are a lot of information in the internet. You have a huge knowledge base of articles, books written over it, and most of them they are saying the same thing. Like if you see this article here, this was an interview done with some of the Indian CEOs who were leading through this COVID pandemic for the last few years, and they mentioned that if you have built the right culture, a capable leadership collective, and trust in leadership, it actually helps you move forward and face any obstacles as an organization. They also said that if your culture was focused on learning and purpose, you had a better chance of moving ahead and accelerating the adoption of new ways of working. In another article, it says that the single issue at the heart of organization failure was company culture. And another person wrote about it saying, if culture comes first, performance will follow. And here is some numbers how culture has actually impacted the business outcomes. You see a 65% greater share price increase. There was a 26% less employee turnover, 100% more unsolicited employment applications, 20% less absenteeism from employees, 15% greater employee productivity, and more 30% greater customer satisfaction level. All of this is indicating to the fact that organization culture is a really, really important aspect. Okay. So now did somebody say something? Yeah. So, if you move ahead, the question is then, what is organization culture? Right. So there is a Mentimeter link here. Ashutosh, can you paste this link on the chat, please? I want us to all, tell me what organization culture is. This is like a quick interactive tool. We're going to click on this link and you should be able to type your answers.
Yeah. So I'm not able to copy it. Can you just
I can
copy it and share? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And just put it in the chat. Yeah. And then they will get it. Yeah.
Yeah. 1 second. I'm trying to do that. Yeah, so it's on your chat. Click on that link and you should be able to, get to that sheet. Yeah, so you'll have 60 seconds to answer. You can quickly go ahead and do it. Is everybody able to access the link and type in?
Yeah, at least, I could access it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, culture is, also working style, the way we solve problems, the way we make decisions. It's also, comes across in policies. It's the way people behave. Definitely the way, empathize with people. It also talks about, mindset. You're right. It also talks about the ways of working. Yeah, there is also a standard way of working. There is a norm. The way we communicate, the way we are, working together as a group. Yeah, it also focuses on values. What values are there, underlying the organization's goals, and what is coming out on the surface is also culture. Yeah, behaviors. Absolutely. Comfortable to get along. Empowering engineers. Comfortable style, language, empathy. You guys are absolutely right. This is true. When we speak about culture, we are speaking about, I'm not able to share the screen, toggle between the screen. Sorry about that. Yeah. So when we're talking about culture, whatever you guys said, all constitute culture. You were all right. But what is the real definition that the gurus and the, people who have spent their lifetime into organization culture say? Let's understand that definition, right? So what they're saying is a pattern of shared assumption. This is by Edgar Schein. He is the author of the book Organization, Culture and Leadership. And he says, and his definition is a pattern of shared assumptions that a group learned as it solved problems of external adaptation and internal integration that is well enough considered to be valid and therefore to be taught to new members as a correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. What it really means is, when a group of people, get together and, solve a problem, there is a pattern of shared assumptions that is being formed. Okay, the way they integrate together as a team, the way the external issues are triggered, and during that they have come up with one new way of working or some different ways of working, and they've figured that it is so good enough to be valid that as and when new members are joining the organization, they believe that this needs to be taught back to them as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel with respect to those problems. Okay, it's a little too deep, so let's simplify it. Okay, so another definition, and the simplest of definition, is William Snyder defines it as how we do things around here to succeed. It's exactly the same thing that Edgar is saying, but it's a simpler format, right? It also means organization calls out, culture calls out what is important and what is not for the organization. He's also speaking about culture means, it is helping members of a group create meaning from their experiences. So because of the kind of experiences they've had, be it in a one-on-one conversation with your boss, be it in conversations with the HR, with your peers, be it the way you're treated, in specific situations, be it whatever that you're doing within an organization, even in the working style, they've come to understand there are certain things that are acceptable, certain things that are not. And based on that, they have created a boundary for their behavior. And that is what becomes the culture of the organization, right? And it also means that culture can be described as a DNA of an organization. So it is some kind of invisible force that shapes what is happening in the workplace. Why workplace? Even at home, right? We have a certain way of talking to elders or talking to children or behaving in a certain manner. It's exactly the same thing, right? Culture, organization culture is becoming the DNA of an organization. Similarly, home culture can become the DNA of your home, right? So that's the definition. Now, with this thing, do you think there are different types of culture? What are your thoughts around that? Now that you know the definition.
Yeah, compete culture, collaboration culture.
Yeah. So there is a culture of competition. There is a culture of collaboration. What else? So you are agreeing that there are different types of culture, right?
Control also.
Yeah, there is a control culture. Absolutely. Okay.
Relatively open and closed cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. But how do you know what type of culture you're in or your organization is?
To do assessment, then only you can able to know assessment with different people, different projects.
Yeah. So is it only assessment, or is there something that you can notice generally, even otherwise?
Notice and assessment, both. It's not notice. So if you intentionally you need to do notice and assessment, then only you could able to find out, because you are going to work on that. That means you need to do assessment and notice both.
Yeah. So when you say notice, you're saying observing what is happening in the organization, right? The way we talk, the way we speak, the way we behave, right? Yeah. So what we are going to focus on in today's session is talking about a framework or a tool that will help us understand what kind of a culture we are in, or what kind of a bias our organizations have towards a particular type of culture. Okay, so if you look at the screen, you're seeing that, Robert Quinn and Cameron, they were two professors at the Michigan School of Business, and they built this competing values framework. Their intent was to visualize and understand the underlying values. So Mihir, what you mentioned as compete, collaborate, control, are all values that are there in the organization system. And these are the values that organization really focus on or want to be known, or really that's their way of working, right? So this framework actually identifies that underlying values based on what is seen and what is observable, and then it actually acts as a map or an organizing mechanism or a sense-making device for management and organizational performance. Now, what do I mean by this? Right? So what do I mean by this is competing value framework is really primarily made up of 4 different culture types. Okay. And the CVF is one of the 40 most powerful frameworks in the history of business. Okay, and like people have personalities, organizations have personalities, and these personalities can be put into 4 different quadrants or 4 primary quadrants. And like you mentioned, it's collaborate, create, compete, and control. Okay, and one thing I want to call out is there is no right or wrong. It doesn't mean that control culture is bad and only the others are good, or it doesn't mean that compete culture is bad and the rest are good, or anything else, right? So none of these cultures are good or bad. It is just the way that organizations like to drive towards success, their organizations towards success. Okay, so let's understand each of this quadrant a little bit to understand where our organization bias lies, where we work. Okay, now let's see at the create culture. Okay, when we are talking about create culture, what we're really talking about is a dynamic workplace. Okay, here the leaders are visionary, they are futuristic, they are innovators, they are entrepreneurs. Okay, and most of the characteristics of this space is that it's constantly changing. There are a lot of ideas coming through. These people who are in these type of cultures are focusing on breakthrough solutions. They really want transformational change. They embrace risk, and the climate or the culture in their organization is very relaxed. There are very few rules, there are very few policies and procedures, because creativity needs to be fostered. They believe in giving them the autonomy. They are free to experiment, and because there is so much of freedom, there is new possibilities for innovative solutions to come. And success here is defined by unique and original products and services, right? And some of the examples for this space is startups. Mostly when organizations start at the beginning, they fall in this space because they come into the industry with a new product or solution, right? And that's why that's where the create culture looks like. Okay, now the next type of culture is compete. This culture really focuses on winning. Okay, they are result oriented, they have the winner's attitude, they are never satisfied, they always want more, they want to be the best in the industry. There is so much pressure in this environment that if they don't perform well, they have the chances of losing their jobs. They are focusing on speed to market. They're also automating stuff so that things are getting out in the market quicker. They have cutting edge technology. Their way of working is the people who are working in these spaces have got stretch goals. They want to be number one. There is a lot of excellence of craftsmanship, right? And there is huge competitiveness, and they also focus on having a competitive advantage. They want to build their brand, and for them, customer is the king. Okay, and their goals are about immediate short wins, right? And some of the examples of these kind of organizations are Walmart, IKEA, and so on. Right now, let's look at the third type of organization, which is called the collaborate organization. Collaborate quadrant really focuses on people. And people, when I say people, it's also about team. It's also about building the team strength. They focus a lot more on relationships. They focus a lot more on people over process. There is a lot of mentoring, nurturing going on, and they live like an extended family. Okay, and the way they take decision is shared. They always consult each other, work with each other, and take. Sometimes it gets to a point when even they sacrifice some of their happiness to make someone else happy or feel comfortable. There's a lot of openness, trust. And while these compete culture is focusing on short-term wins, they are really focusing on long-term change. Okay, so that's where these guys fall. Now, the leaders are usually mentors, facilitators, team builders, and their success is measured by the internal climate, how people feel. There is a lot of concern for people. And some examples are family-owned business. Wikipedia can be an example. Twitter can be another one. Okay, so the fourth type of culture is the control culture. I think this is one of the most talked about culture we've seen, and most of the time this has a negative connotation, right? But their focus is actually on doing things right. Okay, and you can call it a very structured, compliant workplace. The leaders here are coordinators, they are organizers, monitors. There is a tight delegation here. These guys measure everything. Their focus is efficiency, repeatability. It's also functional, a lot more hierarchical. Their mindset is also really tough. It's difficult to break the mindset. Okay. And they're really objective. They're really realistic, and they focus on safety, reliability, efficiency, especially operational efficiency. They're also, talking about compliance and so on. And, their success is defined by authority, control, and accountability. Some examples are government agencies. If you look at McDonald's as a fast food, restaurant, constantly, because of the efficiency, they are able to deliver it that much faster, right? So these are the 4 types of quadrants, okay, and 4 types of culture that you can see. Now, do you notice any tension between each of them? And the reason, it's called competing values framework is because each of these quadrants are competing with each other. So what are the tensions that you guys notice?
Between collaborate and compete culture, there is a tension, I think, because collaborate wants us to all work together and collaborate, but compete wants a result. Okay.
Correct.
Similarly, control and create also.
Yeah, so there is definitely conflict. And, if you actually look at these words here, these 2 quadrants are really focusing on people. These 2 quadrants are focusing on systems, process, procedure, right? While these 2 quadrants are, orientation is flexibility, there is stability here. And while these 2 quadrants are focused on internal unity, internal integration, they also want to make sure, it's about working together and for today. Okay. While these 2 quadrants are focusing on the external, the customer is the king, they also focus on possibility. They are more focused on what is driving the market, how is the market doing, what can we do to get there, what can we do to bring better solutions to solve the customer needs, and so on, right? Along with that conflict, there is also this conflict, the size of change and the speed of change. While control culture is focusing on incremental change, the create culture wants to do a transformational change, big change, right? And while your collaborate culture is focusing on long-term change, your compete culture is focusing on fast change. They want immediate change. I want everything out in the market so that they can make more money, they can build a better brand, known to be as the best organization. What kind of organizations do you see, falling in these kind of domains? If you actually look back in your organizations, do you see any department falling in each of these quadrants? Can you just name a few? Give me an example for control. How about
military people?
Yeah. Military organizations fall here, right? You're right.
In my company, it could be the IT security team, probably.
Yeah, that's right.
IT security team, yeah.
Correct. Security, compliance, finance, legal, all of these guys have constraints, and they put constraints on the organization, and all for good reasons, to ensure that organization is not going through the risk, or to ensure that the organization is stable, right? So what about this side on the create? What kind of teams do you think fall under create?
Any type of R&D department.
Right. R&D teams, innovation teams, accelerator teams, all of those fall here in create. What about collaborate?
Any department that builds software for external customer, that where the requirements are not fully, 100% known in the beginning.
Yeah. So who focuses on people and collaborating and keeping everybody together, internally focused? It's most often the HR, right? You have the HR, and then here in the compete space, you have mostly sales and marketing. They are trying to take the products out of your organization to put it out in the market, right? So this is what, competing culture is all about. So Mihir, you had Okay. So, while these two top quadrants really align how people feel, how people, sense, and how they go about working together as one team, this below two quadrants really focuses on the system, right? They focus on, the focus is on how to work better, or, how to get their work organized. All right. So that's the tension that they have. And that's why it's really, really important for us to understand the competing value framework, because it helps us to realize where the organization bias is. And if that bias is not aligned with the direction that your organization wants to go, then there is a conflict. So does it have merit then, to go about and shape certain things to change the way we are working, right? So let's, here are some quick examples for you to just figure out which organization falls where. But does it mean that all of these organizations, let's say if I say it's creative, does it stay only in create? Or does it have an option to move around? Okay, so my question then is culture static or dynamic? Do you think the culture stays the same?
I guess it depends on the times and the situation. Different projects different projects have to follow different types of culture for succeeding. Yeah, depends on the situation.
Correct. It depends definitely on the situation. And can we? Okay, let's not go to Mentimeter. That's fine. I think you answered the question, so we'll move ahead. So what we'll do is we'll quickly see, a case study for Apple and see how their culture moved around. Okay, so if you look at this picture here, what it really talks about is, when Apple was founded, right? It was founded by Steve Jobs in 1976. And the Apple computer company was through a single entrepreneurship, right? So Steve Jobs was a charismatic leader, and because he was so focused and his value was around creativity, he wanted to bring new products into the world. So he also hired such kind of people, unconstrained folks who are free to create whatever they knew, free to build the best product in the whole world, come up with innovative solutions to solve the need, right? And because of which this the organization at that time was dominated by entrepreneurship, innovation, and creative culture, right? Which means they had less control and very little stability, because at that at that scale at which they were, it was okay to be in the create quadrant. Okay, but as and when they started doing more, they hired more people and they started doing things together. They moved into this space which is called collaborate, where they called themselves group of pirates. Okay, and they started feeling good about being in the Apple family. They started coming up with Apple logo stickers on their cars. They started wearing t-shirts which had their logo and so on, right? And this is where they actually built the Macintosh as well, if you look at this picture here, right? So at this time, the Macintosh product and all the other products were so successful that there was enormous growth. And this led to scale. And at the rate at which they were selling, they had to get a lot of distribution centers because they were expanding worldwide. And then they realized that there was a need for control and, some kind of standard procedure to survive that. Okay. And then they slowly moved into the hierarchical culture. Okay, which means because of the scale that they were in, they had to put some compliance, they had to put some policies, they had to put some regulations. At this juncture, because Steve Jobs is very, very, oriented towards create value, he could not handle the team and force the hierarchical culture, right? So at this point, he was fired. Okay, and this actually introduced them to a new way of working, which is where there was no longer an agile organization. There was no longer any innovation being done, but they were definitely getting more efficient and more market savvy, and the volume that they were building was getting higher rather than the new creative solutions they were coming up with, right? And at this point, the board realized that they need more interesting stuff, rather than just continue to build in volumes. So they hired Steve Jobs back, and at that time, John Scully was, in the control space. John Scully was the leader, and he brought in a lot of great policies and structures and metrics into the organization. And that continued. Steve Jobs did not abolish any of that because he realized the value by then of having a balance of all of these elements into your culture. And then you will see that once he joined, for a long time, they actually introduced a lot of interesting new products. And, in 2011, for health reasons, he quit, and we know what happened later. But this is a very good example of how organizations' culture is so dynamic that based on the external triggers or internal innovations that keep happening, culture keeps changing. And as and when new people keep joining, you will see the culture evolving. In this case, Steve Jobs was on a create side. So there was a lot of creativity going on. When John Scully joined the organization, there was a lot of stability that he got to the organization, right? So neither of them are good or bad. This was required at that point. This was required at that time, right? So it is really about what is so important for you and your organization at that particular point. And are you able to recognize that and take the organization towards that goal? Right. So CVF is, it's unique in this way because it helps you recognize that bias, and it helps you connect the dot. And it also looks at your individual leadership behavior and how that is actually, producing some kind of culture and impacting. And what Steve Jobs did at this time around was that instead of changing anything, he actually started building and developing competencies that will cater to the external influences, right? So that's how Apple has stood strong and stood the test of time. Okay. So here's another example where Kodak failed to do that, and they went into bankruptcy. They had a lot of management hierarchical issues, and they could not accept or align to the changing environment, and they had to succumb. Versus Fujifilm, which made use of this opportunity and did really well. Okay, so culture, what you see on the culture front is only on the surface. Okay, that's what I want to talk about. You could see in the way your environment looks like. It could be in the compensation that you get. Your culture can be visible there. You can also see it in kind of standards and policies you have. It also can be seen with the kind of interactions people have and they behave with each other. In your meetings, in your statuses, in your team events, and so on. It also is, predominantly heavy on how leadership behaves. And the structure of the organization. Okay, but all of these are only on the surface, right? Whatever we just spoke about is on the surface, but what really happens on the top is actually the result of what is here. And into Edgar's definition, the kind of shared assumptions that we have, so the kind of values that we have as people, the kind of unwritten rules and perceptions and beliefs we have, and the kind of stories we tell with every incident that happens is really what defines the culture. So as leaders, we have a huge responsibility of, ensuring that we are building a culture that is actually trying to shape people's beliefs, perceptions, and shared assumptions so that we can see what we want to see. Okay. So the key takeaways are, like we said, culture is the DNA of an organization. It's an invisible force that shapes what happens. Every organization has aspects of every quadrant, some positive, some negative, and know that it's constantly evolving based on how we are making decisions, how we are talking, how we are having those conversations. So there is no good or bad culture type, and it's important to identify the bias, how that is limiting us from growing really. If you're too control oriented, then probably you're not going to see creativity. If you're too creative, then there may not be stability. So identify that bias and see how we can, reduce the amount of obstacles it is turning out to be. So recognize if you're taking our strengths too far, which is like I just said, if you're taking control too far, it is going to hamper creativity, and hence it will become our weakness. Okay, but one last thing is culture change is really, really hard. It's complex, it's time consuming. and it needs a lot of commitment to shape our culture over time. So if somebody says you can change culture, that's going to be really hard, but you can definitely shape your culture with little nuances that you can bring about in the way your policies are measured, are laid out, your metrics are defined, and your structures are there in your organization. One last thing is that culture and leadership are two sides of the same coin, like Edgar Schein says. They have a symbiotic relationship. If you remember that in the Create culture, it was the founder's value that defined the culture of the organization. But as years passed, the culture actually, affected the leadership. So he had to quit, and John Scully had to join because the culture had evolved. Right, so they are going to complement each other, or be very symbiotic in relationship, and that's important to know. Yeah, so that's all I had. I am open to questions, and I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Rashmi. So before we open for questions, so first of all, thanks a lot, Rashmi, for the wonderful talk. I think I'm sure the participants would have learned many things about culture, and the last one definitely. And I really like that Apple story, right? I mean, that graphic, what you displayed. Yeah. So before we open up the floor for questions, just a quick thing. It would be good if you can come on a camera when you're asking a question, so that we know who's asking the question. I think it will really be great. And most importantly, please make sure that the questions are relevant to the topic which is being discussed, right? I mean, okay. I mean, if you have any other question, you can reach out to Rashmi later also. I mean, I think many of you are already connected with her on LinkedIn, and or you can connect with me also later on. So try to come on a camera when you're asking a question. Also, quick thing, wanted to share a couple of groups which we have. So I think many of you are already subscribers of the YouTube channel. So do connect on the YouTube channel. There are more such videos coming up, more such talks lined up. And we also have a LinkedIn group now. So I'm also sharing the link to you. And yeah, with that, I think we have some time for Q&A. So yeah, we can go ahead with Q&A. So yeah, anyone who has got a question, please unmute yourself and you can ask a question, and try to preferably come on a camera.
Thank you, Rajshekhar.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, anyone has a question? I know many of you asked the question during the session, but any questions, please unmute yourself. Yeah, Murli, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, Rashmi. I'd like to know what are the good books that you would like to suggest for this?
Yeah, so Edgar Schein's Organization, Culture and Leadership is a very, very powerful book. I think if you really are interested in to understand deeper, you can. He also speaks about 3 levels of, culture model. That's very interesting, which really talks about the iceberg image I showed you in the end. So that is a great book to go for.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry, I was outside. I was walking, so I could not switch on the video.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no worries, Murli, that's fine. Yeah, anyone else who has a question? Yeah, Anthony,
yes, Rashmi, it was a great session, very informative. And the question I have is, so you have a framework to identify the culture of an organization, the present culture of an organization.
Sure.
Is that the case?
Yeah, so this there is a culture survey, which is actually came out of this competing values framework. It is in their website. If you go, it is called OCIA. Okay, it's organization culture. I can't remember, assessment something. But we also have a sample culture survey, which is free on agileleadershipjourney.com. You can click on that and just give it a shot. It's a very short survey that you can try and get a flavor of the actual assessment.
All right. Yeah, you answered my question. I was wondering if it was a software that identifies following some methods. So it is a survey-based method that identifies culture of. Yes, the other question I had in mind is to some extent, obviously, this is done when kind of agile transformation is done from the conventional method for an organization, right?
Yeah. So whenever you want to bring about a change, right, not necessarily agile transformation, any transformation.
Any transformation.
You want to see where you stand. You want to see where your current state is, right? So this will give you a feeler of where you are. So it may not be scientific, because when you answer those questions, you're going by your experiences, right? But what is important is it gives you a segue, and then you can actually do those real interviews with people, or come up with some internal way of figuring out, and then that becomes scientific, because you're collecting data and going through. But this just gives you a starting point.
Right. So they must also have some target in mind, right? When they want to make a change, they have a goal, and then they want to see where we are now and towards what culture we want to move.
Correct. Absolutely. So it's like I said, there's nothing right or wrong, right? It's not bad to be in control or bad to be in create or whatever. It's just that if today what's happening is most organizations are not even aware of their biases. So this will help you understand where your bias is, where you are, heavily going towards. And then maybe if you want to go, like if you want to be known as the most creative organization, and you are really control heavy, which is too many structures, policies. Let's say your innovation team or R&D team came up with a brilliant idea and they want to implement it, but there is such a huge approval process from the finance department that the idea just disappears because the market is changing so fast. So is there merit in really changing some of the ways of working, so that creativity is fostered and encouraged in the organization to come up with interesting ideas? So
all right. Yeah. Understood. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any questions? I mean, for Rashmi? Okay. Yeah, I think Sachin, you're on mute. Sorry, Sachin, you're on mute.
Hi, Rashmi. It was a good session. One thing I would like to understand, because the challenge currently that I'm facing in my organization, I'm currently handling one of the biggest banking giants in India, and that's my customer, and my organization is trying to do as much as things possible for ensuring that we are doing best. But the challenge that we are facing is the acceptance level from the customer is like they even though we've been them with for past 6-7 years now, what we see is something that they are not probably we don't see acceptability from their side. Even though we know that we are developing. So initially we started with about two we are a service providers, and we are into managed services. Initially we started off with 2 technologies. Today we are handling about not less than 19-20 technologies with the customer. And the approach of I actually wanted to change approach of my organization, because even my organization is getting more business from outside, but they are just trying to focus on this particular one single customer. Then because what we are seeing into, we are also into security industry, and managed services for security industry is paying much well. So that change acceptability is not there in even my organization, because they are just sticking to one customer. Then it's like a big sea out there where there are a lot of fishes out there. We can go and approach them, but that accepted, if my organization or the customer, if they're not accepting, what and how can we try to change it?
So you're talking about changing their mindset, right? We are talking about how can we develop growth mindset in people, and that's really, really difficult and tough, right? Like we saw in the iceberg image, we are trying to change their belief system, their assumptions, and the values that they have been living all these lives. So it's going to be tough, but you can always start somewhere. So I'm an agile leadership journey guide, and I also conduct classes on agility in leadership and agility in organizations. So we have a curriculum that will focus on developing that growth mindset in people. If you're interested, we can connect offline and discuss about the course. But otherwise, it's all about changing the mindset. And that's going to be really difficult unless they are not given the right education and awareness as to that actually impeding their growth and the growth of the organization. Right. So as leaders, that is really important. One of the things that I really when I was listening to one of the talks by Pete Behrens, who's the founder of Agile Leadership Journey, he says, culture is like the shadow of an organization, and everybody has a shadow, right? But executives and senior leaders, they have the largest shadow because they have that much power. But as Scrum Masters and middle managers and product owners, we also have a shadow. We cast more, acute influence on people because we directly interact with people. So is there something that you can do to develop that mindset, by educating them and encouraging them to behave in certain ways and even living by those agile values and principles, right? Can you do that? If not, then there's definitely merit in, getting people trained on how to develop a growth mindset and take it from there.
Okay. Please share me the links, the training sessions that you discussed about. If you can just share links in the group for,
Yeah, so I have already put a link for agileleadershipjourney.com. So if you go to the website, there is a list of programs, explore all programs. There is agility in leadership. There's agility in organizational, so you can just click on any of them and you will know. So there are guides all over the globe. I don't do public workshops really. I do private workshops, but if you are a group of 8 to 10 people and want to get together, I can conduct a session for you.
Okay.
12 module session. Every module is 90 minutes each. So if you want to do only leadership agility, it is 6 modules. If you want to do only agility in organization, it's another 6 modules. You want to do both, you can do both in 12.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Any question? Okay. So meanwhile, Rashmi, till the time people ask questions, just wanted to acknowledge you coming here and sharing your wonderful thoughts with us. So this is a small token of appreciation from our side. We in any case will be sharing this with you formally in an email. But sure. I thought that till the time people ask questions, I will just quickly share this with you. So thanks for that, and thanks for the wonderful talk around this topic.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. This is very thoughtful. And thank you for all your questions. In case you have more questions, please feel to post them on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to answer. All right.
Thanks, Rashmi.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks participants for this for joining this. I know there was a lot of people also on LinkedIn and YouTube live. So really appreciate all of you. And do watch this space. We have more interesting speakers, more interesting topics coming up as we go along as a part of happy hours of coaching session. Friday evenings, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. IST. So once again, thanks everyone. And once again, thanking Rashmi for the wonderful talk. And have a great weekend. And most importantly, stay healthy and stay safe.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Rashmi. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.